Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Everyday Fan Podcast, where we're here just talking to everyday fans, like the title says. I've really enjoyed these so far and getting into some other topics. I love talking the Braves, but today I'm going to have a guest on. He's been on before, Chris Dirgo. Glad to have him back, and we're going to just kind of get away from the Braves a little bit. They were off yesterday, so we're going to talk about some things other than the Braves. Of course, tune into my TikTok videos. I'll be talking about the Braves on there, of course, pretty much every day. But I did want to get into some other sports and some things that have been happening. Well, good to have you on. Thanks for coming on again, Chris. How you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great, great. Doing really good, really good. So, yeah, I was just going to jump right in actually to the NFL draft, which just happened. I didn't really follow it round by round or anything, just kind of looked at what was going on with it. So, did you see any of it at all, or were you
Yeah, we
checking
watched we
into it?
watched a good bit of it. The biggest surprise for me out of the draft, well, I guess not surprise, but I guess probably the thing that I was the most curious about was Diego Pavia not getting drafted by anybody. I think it's probably the right move, but he got invited to Ravens minicamp. But what's your thoughts on that? You think too controversial of a family, too controversial of a player, too small of a player?
I think it was a little bit of that. I think a lot of it was kind of the controversy surrounding him, kind of his attitude going into it. All the teams kind of had interviews with some of the players at camp and stuff like that. I'm not even sure if he went to the camp or not, but You know, I tell you, teams are kind of wanting to get away from the controversy kinda thing, you know?
It's such a big money
It
sport
goes
nowadays, it's really hard to put that on the line for somebody who's very unpredictable.
absolutely. I mean, it goes back to the whole Colin Kaepernick thing.
Right.
People don't want controversy, and he wasn't I don't know that he would have been a starter if somebody would have picked him up anyway at that point in his career, but he was a lot better than a lot of the backups who were playing in the NFL.
No doubt.
But teams don't want that controversy,
Especially the
They
old money in
like
the
you
NFL.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that was a lot of it, why
And
he didn't get drafted. He definitely has the talent,
well,
and I
staying
think that's a case where he would have just kinda laid low a little bit and just, you know, hadn't run it and I think it may even be part of why he didn't win the Heisman too,
yeah, as well as
But
I think it's a big size game in sports now, and I think he's really just undersized. I have some other thoughts on that from the draft, but staying at quarterback position real quick, Carson Beck, former quarterback of Georgia, got drafted in the 3rd round to go to the Cardinals. What's your thoughts on that?
well, he's definitely gonna get a shot, They just got rid of Kyler Murray, who was a number 1 overall pick, a few years ago, and that's the thing, Mendoza was the number 1 overall this year, and I was kinda looking back at some of those, and it's kind of a risky proposition sometimes drafting a quarterback number 1. But, yeah, I think Beck I know he had his struggles here in Georgia. When he was at Georgia, had a really good year with Miami other than a few games, he gets kind of wild, throws a lot of interceptions sometimes, but I think he's got the talent. I think he's got the arm to be an NFL quarterback, and I think he'll get a shot in Arizona because they really, they got rid of Murray, and they really don't have a strong candidate to, you know
I'm kind of a little bit of a Carson Beck hater after he left Georgia, and I felt like he was overrated because at that time you have a player like a Brock Bowers who's going to catch anything within a 5-yard radius of him, and it's going to make any quarterback look good. So then he leaves, thinks he's sniffing his own farts, whatever, goes to Miami and throws all these interceptions. Doesn't he still has a good team around him that obviously they continue to
Right.
go on in the playoffs and everything, but I'm not super high on Carson Beck. I don't think he has the work ethic there. I don't think he has the determination of Fernando Mendoza. Somebody like him is going to go in. They're going to be a franchise quarterback. They're going to do the work. They're going to do the press releases. They're going to do every single thing that they have to do to be an elite level NFL quarterback, and I don't know if Carson
Right.
Beck has that. He got the money too early. He's been down in Miami, living the Miami lifestyle. I'm not sure how that's gonna translate to a place like Arizona.
Well, he's gonna have to. I mean, they're not gonna hand him the job. It's just he's not gonna have the competition that, some other quarterbacks might have that got drafted. So he's gonna have to do the work. If he doesn't, he's not. If he comes in and, starts throwing interceptions like he does sometimes, he's not gonna last long.
Yeah, and if he
You
has
know
that lackadaisical attitude, if he wants to play with the girls, if he wants to go out drinking, if he wants to you know, to be an elite level quarterback, you really have to have a singular focus, and it has to be football, and it has and, that comes with a cost. Tom Brady will tell you that. There's a cost involved in that, but,
Well, yeah, absolutely, and talent only gets you so far. You even go back to, Michael Vick when he was in Atlanta. He was unbelievable talent, had some unbelievable games, led them to the playoffs, but then, of course, he had his issues with the dogfighting stuff. But when he came back, went to Philadelphia, he even said, he didn't he didn't study film like he should have. He didn't put the work in when he was with Atlanta. Just imagine what he could have been if he would have put that work in.
yeah.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Quarterback's the hardest position to play, anywhere. And, yeah, if you don't put the work in, talent's only gonna take you so far.
And especially in today's day and age because it's a sales game and an advertising game as much as it's a football game. And if you're not gonna be that role, it's harder to make you a quarterback in today's NFL
Right.
because you have to
So
be
the other
paying
one,
attention more.
kind of the shocker in the first round was the Rams taking Ty Simpson.
What do you think about
Um,
that?
well, I get it, and it's kind of when you look back over teams that have kinda done that as far as trying to bring in a quarterback, Stafford's not going anywhere. He won the MVP last year.
Right.
He's older, he's 38, he probably only has a few more years, but, he's not going anywhere right away, so you bring a quarterback in to kinda learn under him. It's worked well sometimes, and then it's been a disaster sometimes. Just depends. And something Green Bay's done, you know, they had Brett Favre forever, brought Aaron Rodgers in to sit under him for a couple years. And then same thing with Aaron Rodgers. They drafted, Love, and he came in. And a lot of times, I think it depends on the communication they have with who's there. In Green Bay, it didn't go over too well. You know,
I think a
the
lot of
the
times it
sitting quarterback.
doesn't go over too well,
Yeah.
but I feel like Ty Simpson is not that level yet. Watching him play at
Well,
Alabama, he's not. He needs some development.
he only started what, 1 year in Alabama.
Yeah, he
So
was there, so
I was shocked he went in the first round.
absolutely.
Um,
But talking
if you're
about
gonna
some guys that went in the first round, we saw some offensive linemen go from Georgia. We saw, Monroe Freeling and big guy, he went 19th in the first round, and Georgia Tech had a first round draft pick, if anybody can believe that. They had Keelan Rutledge, who's a guard, kind of a squatty guy, really. He's 6'4", 316 pounds. I mean, I know in today's world, 6'4" is kinda, smaller on the smaller side, but 316 pounds for the Tech went to the Texans from Georgia Tech. I think that shows some of their development over there, that Georgia Tech is putting together a program. Is gonna take time. You have to be committed. You have to be able to have some potential to either pick people up out of the portal or to get some guys who are gonna kinda remain loyal since you're working with a lower NIL budget than a Georgia
right,
Tech.
yeah, absolutely. And they've had some really good linemen, not like Georgia's had, but they've had some good linemen that have gone the past few, even when Paul Johnson was there running the option, they had some linemen that got, that were drafted in the NFL and had some long careers. But they're good. It's defense is the side of the ball that they're really hurting on. So they gotta improve that. But the other thing, I know a lot of people, I've tried to be a Falcons fan because we lived in Atlanta so long. The 28-3 kinda did me in the Super
I
Bowl.
haven't rooted for 'em
We
since they cost me that money in Vegas. I went to Vegas for that Super Bowl.
that was terrible, but so I've tried to be a Falcons fan. I've always liked Matt Ryan when he came in. I like Michael Vick. till he went away. But, I thought Matt Ryan was a really good quarterback, and they but people complain because it seemed like, they never drafted Georgia players, and it almost seemed like they avoided them. They had opportunities to draft some really good, especially defensive players, and they didn't. Well, they finally drafted a wide receiver, so Zachariah Branch is going to the Falcons from Georgia.
So I actually did a little research on this because he went in the 3rd round, and I looked up the positions for that. I don't know if you know Zachariah Branch's stats. Obviously, huge Bulldog fan here. I think 3rd round might have been a little high on a Zachariah Branch as fast as he is, and I think that's why the Falcons were able to draft him because I don't think anybody else was gonna draft him in the 3rd round. He's 5'8", 177 pounds.
Yeah, wide receiver is a position where, it's kinda like one or the other. Your speedsters can kinda be the small guys like Xavier Worthy that got drafted out of Texas. I'm a big Texas fan. He's really done well with the Chiefs. When Tyreek Hill was there and with Miami, he's not a big guy. But then you do need those big guys, like a big body guys that can, score touchdowns, go in the red zone and, go get balls. So it's kind of, good to have kind of a mix like that. So,
So
um,
in this year's draft, every wide receiver except Zachariah Branch that was drafted in the first 3 rounds was 5'11" or better. There was
I was gonna
3
say
of them.
probably over 6 feet.
There was 3 of them that were 5'11". The rest were 6'2" or better.
Right.
So if you wanna be a
Hey,
first round draft pick in today's day and age, you gotta be 6'2", you gotta be 6'4", you gotta be able to go up and get the ball and run a 4-second 40. You
right.
you have to be an
Yeah, that's
elite
kind
athlete,
of
so I'm kinda wondering, hey, now remember, I'm not down on Zachariah Branch. I'm hoping that Zachariah Branch comes out there and outperforms everybody, that he's a speedster, he's got wheels, he catches the ball, he gets open, but do I think he has the playmaking ability to go up and get the ball to really break free? I don't know because 4 inches makes a big difference, you know?
yeah, he's not that kinda he's not a guy that's gonna catch, 100 balls a year because, he's not that 3rd down receiver you're going to. He's a guy that's gonna run those, you know, little wide receiver screens or stretch the field, the long post plays or flies. He's a guy that's gonna do that and, maybe catch 50 balls, but have a 20-yard per catch average because he's catching deep stuff. I think that's where he can be successful.
And I hope he
But
does.
yeah, he's
Believe
not
me, I hope he does, but I wonder, did the Falcons pay too much? In their franchise building strategy, is he the right
right.
guy in the 3rd round?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
One thing that's really, I like to see the guys come out of college, make it to the NFL. You can tell the ones that had heart, you can tell the ones who you really think are gonna be career football players, and you can kinda tell the ones you think are gonna fizzle out. But for sure, one thing that I think is affecting a lot of college athletes, and it made a big story this week, was the Texas Tech quarterback, Brennan Sorsby.
I I saw that this morning. That's crazy.
Texas
That's
Tech
crazy.
seems to be backing him up. They're saying, "Hey, we care about this guy. We love this guy. We want him to be our quarterback. We're happy he's going out and getting help for his gambling addiction." But the guy just signed a $6 million name, image, and likeness deal with Texas Tech, and then had made hundreds of bets on collegiate level athletes. So where this is kind of really the first big story breaking of it at this level. Obviously we had the Shohei situation with the translator and all this a couple years ago, but especially in football, this is kind of the first we're seeing. But DraftKings, FanDuel, legalized gambling is gonna have an impact on the game in collegiate sports and in NFL sports. I mean, and it's such a huge business.
Yeah, it is. It is. And they're sponsors of, a lot of the on the networks. They got the commercials on while the games are on. You know, they even advertise some of the not the college necessarily, but some of the pros, they advertise the betting lines and things like that during the games even. So, yeah, it is gonna be an interesting thing, and, he did the right thing. He's into gambling rehab or whatever, kinda before it broke, so, they're kinda trying to head it off, I think. Hopefully, that was his idea and not the school saying, "You need to do this," you know, I don't know. But, I mean, it even goes back he was a redshirt in Indiana, uh, and was betting on Indiana games. They've
Tragic.
gone back and found that. He only bet on them to win, and he didn't bet on any games he played in. I think he only played in 1 game his redshirt year, but still, he's betting on the team he's playing for.
Can we
That's
reopen
the
the conversation with Pete Rose, you know? You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
and it's this is a billion-dollar business, and this is not gonna be the last person affected by this. I think adults in America should be allowed to gamble on sports. I do agree with that, but I think there's gotta be some kinda training, protection, etcetera, for these college level athletes because I know how I was at 18, 19, 20 years old. I was not developed the same way that I am now, and I don't believe these guys are. They have a lot of pressure on them. They have a lot of money at their disposal. They have a certain level of fame, which brings this whole set of problems. And I feel like you remember when a lot of the NFL players were going broke, guys like Warren Sapp, guys like what's the other one who
Oh, yeah.
and they had to institute these pensions, they had to institute these financial advisors. I think the Rock made a whole show about this with the ballers when he got into that industry. I think there's gonna have to be an industry that comes along for some type of training or protection for these collegiate level athletes and eventually NFL athletes because I think you're gonna see it. I mean, you saw it at Shohei at the highest level of baseball.
Yeah, I think so too, and they gotta come up with some kinda rules. Like, right now, as far as college goes, I think they're not allowed to bet on, college or pro sports. That's kind of against the rules. Now, I don't think you should be able to bet, like a pro football player can't bet on pro football. They got insider information,
Right.
it's like, is that fair? Especially if it's teams they're playing. Yeah, I think, if they wanna bet on baseball, go for it, they don't have anything to do with it. They're not they may be able to talk to somebody, but anybody can kinda get the information they can get on that. But when you're betting on your own sport, yeah, I think that and you can especially a game you may be playing in, that's obviously a no-no because you could affect the outcome of it. Then you get into point shaving and stuff like that's happened. I think there were some college basketball players, kinda lower level ones, not stars, but that there was a big controversy on, earlier this year or last year. So, yeah, and that goes back to the Pete Rose thing. I love Pete Rose, loved watching him play, Charlie Hustle, great. He bet on baseball while he was playing, while he was coaching. He bet on Reds games. He tried to deny it for years and years and years. I'm sorry. He's in the Hall of Fame because he has the most hits. His name's there. He just doesn't have a plaque there. I'm fine with him not ever getting a plaque there. And because it was against the rules,
It's a
and he knew
slippery
it.
slope. It's definitely a slippery
And
slope
he
for sure.
but I do think if he'd have come out right away and said, "I did it. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry," he'd be in by now. But he denied it for so long and tried to say, "I never did it." He did that for so long, then he just made everybody mad that
Yeah, I
could put
mean,
him
yeah,
in.
you could be very right, but you mentioned the lower level college basketball players. Have you been watching any of this NBA?
Not a whole lot, not a whole lot. I was trying to go back and look and kind of see what was going on so far.
It looks like
I
right
know
now the Duke boys came ahead, rookie of the year wise. Cooper Flag and Con Canuple just outlasted everybody. I love to see it. Cooper Flag being the first teenager and rookie to lead the team in every category since Michael Jordan in 84 and 85. And he was
yeah, and you
the youngest player in history with 35-point game, 40-point game, 45-point game, and a 50-point game, and as well as the youngest player in history to ever have 10 assists in a game. I mean,
that's great.
everybody knows I was super high on Concanupple the last podcast we talked about him. I still love both players. I still love Duke basketball, but it's undeniable that Cooper Flag was the rookie of the year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and, just watching him, his last year at Duke, he was impressive, but I was thinking, you know I don't know, I wasn't sure how his game was gonna translate to the NBA, but obviously I was wrong.
You can't stop the kid, you know? What
It
was
did, and
interesting
yeah.
to me about that voting is Cooper Flagg had the lead with 412 votes for Rookie of the Year. Concanupple was only behind by 26 points at 386 votes to go for Rookie of the Year. So it was a very close race despite because Concanupple had a league leading 273 three-pointers during the course of the season.
Wow.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, that is
273 three-pointers
for a rookie,
for a
that's
roo
crazy.
for a 19-year-old rookie or however. I mean, it's not like these guys are 25-year-old rookies like NFL players. They're
Right.
teenagers. But what was crazy to me too, the 3rd place guy was a guy named VJ Edgecombe. He was 290 votes less. 3rd place only had 96 votes, whereas Con in 2nd place had 386. So I think it was a runaway from the 2 Duke boys, you know, teammates. I love to see it. I love to see them winning. I was riding with Charlotte this year. You know, Con definitely helped them, you know, improve. They didn't quite make it there. I'm still riding with Denver. They're trailing to the Timberwolves. I didn't see last night's game, but they were 3-1 before last night's game. So
Yes, it's 3-2, they won last night.
okay, good. So I'm still riding with Denver. The boys out there, I'm hoping that they're doing good. You know,
Yeah, I think the Western Conference kind of just was the class of the NBA. The Eastern Conference teams, I think the Hawks had the best record in the Eastern Conference, but they were like 6th or 7th overall, so I think the Western co whoever comes out of the West is probably gonna end up being your NBA champion.
you know,
The
I
Hawks are
hate to
still in it.
I hate to root for the Lakers as much as I like Luca. That's twice as much that I can't stand LeBron or his son. And I wish Luka and Jaka could get together, but, you know, they right now they're not. So I'm still pulling for my Nuggets.
Yeah, hopefully they can get past, the Timberwolves and keep going. That would be great.
Yeah, and that the
Speaking
Lakers
of
would lose every game.
Speaking of Charlotte and Carolina, just jumping back to the NFL right quick. I know we had talked about since we moved to South Carolina, trying to, find some teams here. We like Coastal's doing good in baseball and the Carolina Panthers, I wish they'd get better so we can support them some, and hopefully they will. But they did sign Haynes King out of Georgia Tech, even though he went undrafted.
They
So,
sure did, and they also that's where the boy from Georgia, that Monroe Freeling, the offensive tackle, that's where he went.
oh yeah.
So hopefully they're
So
realizing, "Hey, we got some winners over here in Georgia. Let's try to bring them a little bit east and grow our program." And I hope Haynes
so
King
we'll
does
see.
good. I feel like what's the quarterback's name? I feel like he's
Bryce Young,
yeah,
yeah, he's
former Bama guy. I'd like to see a Haynes King in that program.
yeah, Bryce Young is another one of those number 1 overall picks that kind of hasn't panned out so far.
He's a fizzler.
Haynes King is a competitor, he wins, he runs the ball a lot. I don't know how his game would translate to the NFL. I don't know if he could stay healthy playing like he did at Georgia Tech, but I think he throws better than people realize just because he ran the ball so much at Tech. But we'll see. He'll get a shot to, at least make the team, and then who knows from there. As quick as quarterbacks get hurt in the NFL, you can be a 3rd stringer and end up starting before the year's over,
That
so
and you said it early on, that je ne sais quoi, that whatever it takes to win, that it factor, like a Bo Nix, like a Tom Brady. Can you dig deep in your gut? Bryce Young is one of those front runner horses. He came from Alabama. He's used to having a 3 touchdown lead. You don't have to, be challenged as much. And then you go to a game like or a team like the Panthers where every game you're contested hard. You don't have the front, out in front lead. Do you have what it takes? I think Haynes King does. I think Haynes King has the gut and the heart to say, let's win this, whatever it takes. Let's drive our guys. Let's pick up the pay. The it factor, so to say.
yeah, definitely a competitor. I mean, he, never gives up, do whatever it takes to win. That's why I hate to see him go at Tech. Of course, they got, Mendoza's brother, so we'll see if he's anywhere near as good as his brother is.
Sometimes the younger brothers wind up being better than the older brothers because they always played up. growing up, they always competed against their high level brother. So their abilities are actually more developed, a year or two ahead because they've always been around higher level competition, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. No question about it. Well, let's switch gears here a little bit and let's jump into a little NASCAR.
Oh, it
We
was an
had
exciting week this week.
Talladega is always exciting, and everybody's always sitting around waiting for the big one, and it happened Sunday.
Thanks a lot, Bubba
Uh,
Wallace. Yeah. I'm definitely not a fan of 2311, but I love to see Bubba Wallace wreck specifically. And he took 26. Well, he didn't take him out of the race, but he affected 26 out of the 40 starting cars in that quote unquote big one on Sunday.
it's crazy. It's crazy, and that goes back to years ago when they were running over 200 miles an hour at topping 210, 215 at Talladega, and they put the restrictor plates on, and just to make the races more competitive, which they are at the super speedways, but it does lead you into those wrecks because everybody's running so close together. One person slips up, there's nothing you can do.
Well,
You're
and
caught
Joey
up in it.
Logano made a comment this week. Even though he's a Ford guy, I still like Joey Logano. But he made a comment this week that it's like two basketballs bouncing together with these next gen cars because of the rounded bumpers. When they bump, you don't know which way they're gonna go. They could go left, they could go right. It's not like bumping somebody in the past where they're gonna go forward or whatever. He said, "Hey, it's two basketballs. These cars are dangerous. The wind does not transfer over them adequately the way you think they're gonna go." And
Right.
some of that I like. I'll be honest with you. It's like why you watch a Evil Knievel jump, because he might wreck. And I like to see the wrecks. Sometimes my guys get affected in that. I still like it. I still enjoy it, and especially when it's a Toyota like a Bubba Wallace or a Denny Hamlin. I love to see those guys wreck. Tyler Reddick, and my boy Hocevar won this week. It's his first.
Absolutely. That was
Yeah, it's his first
first
career
win.
win in 91 starts. I was thinking about that after the race. Like, imagine doing something 91 times and you just can't. He's had a couple runner up positions. He was really close at Daytona this year. But imagine going out there week in, week out, and giving your all to something 91 weeks and you're just not there. And then finally you get it. Like, what a feeling. And he gave the fans a show. The man hung
He
outside
did.
the car, rode up and down the front stretch, put the car into the wall, does a burnout, waves to the fans, puts his cowboy hat on. I mean, it was very.
He absolutely.
It's what the sport needs right now. Is a guy like him, and in my opinion, it also needs the Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick is like the villain, so to say, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's other people that look at Tyler Reddick as the hero, Carson, and those guys as the villain. But it reminds me of the good old days of Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon. Okay. Tyler Reddick is the Rainbow Warrior. Love him or
Right.
hate him, he's talented. He's figured out a way to win this year. I can't stand it. You know what I mean? I love to see anybody else win besides Tyler Reddick. And that's okay. I think the sport needs it. It needs that friction. It's going to make everybody better, and it's going to make the win sweeter for a host of our for my guy Chase Elliott, Hendrick Motorsports. He finished fourth this week. That was a good thing. Kyle Larson, the other Hendrick driver I like, got put out of the race in the big one thanks to Bubba Wallace and didn't get to finish. But I love to see it. It was an exciting race. I didn't watch the whole
Well, and
race,
that's
but
the
I
thing.
always at least watch the last 50 laps and I catch all the highlights. And man, what a show!
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And that's the thing about Hocevar. He's it's not like he's been a also ran. He's run up front. He's been close. He has wrecked a lot. And I heard an interview with Dale Jr. that they asked him, "Who's the guy out there that's you think's closest to races like your dad?" And he mentioned Hocevar. He said, "Yeah, people don't like him sometimes because he might wreck, he might get reckless out there." He said, "But when Dale Sr. was young coming up, that's what he did."
Checkers
you
or
know,
wreckers, baby. Checkers or wreckers.
that's that's why people didn't like him. That's why he drove the black car. He was the intimidator, and it was, he kind of That's who Dale Jr. said reminded him of him. So we'll see if he can build on this win and, maybe of course, as Earnhardt got older, he calmed down a little bit and of course, hated what happened to him at the end, but, he dominated for a long time, like you said, until Jeff Gordon came along,
Yeah.
and that's that was kind of the passing of the torch at that time, but we'll see. We'll see if Reddick can keep it up, if it's him or is it just the car?
I tend to think it's the car after watching last week at Kansas, seeing how he can come from 5, 6 car length back on cars that are supposed to be equally matched and outrun the guy flat. You figured out some type of loophole, in my opinion. I don't want to say it's cheating. I don't want to say it's NASCAR giving him the thing because of the lawsuit. They figured out a way to win, okay? And that's what competitors do. You can't be mad at somebody if they figured out a loophole. But at the same time, let's figure out how to close the loophole. Let's figure out what we can do to stop letting this guy win all these races. And you know, as much as I like Michael Jordan, I'm not a fan of his race team at all. I don't like the attitude. I don't like Denny Hamlin's attitude. He was mad when Tyler Reddick won, and he's half owner of the car, but he's also a competitor. You know what I mean? Like this is just bad
Right.
energy. So I'm not here for it at all in NASCAR. But I do think seeing the young guns win, Ty Gibbs won 2 weeks ago at Bristol. Seeing Carson Hocevar win this week, it's good to see those young guys win because it's gonna keep everybody else honest. It's gonna make it, we haven't had a lot of road tracks this year. We know Van Gisbergen's gonna blow everybody out of the road tracks when we start
Oh, yeah.
those. But I think, it's making NASCAR more exciting again because for a long time it was dead, and if that means
Yeah,
put
absolutely.
Bubba Wallace in the wall every race to get more viewers, then I'm okay with that too.
And NASCAR's known for doing that. If somebody really is looking, dominating, they're gonna look at some way to, bring them back a little bit, make the field closer to them. They've in the past, they've done that during the season, kind of adjusted some things, whether it be the cars, the templates, whatever. I think all the cars are pretty much close to the same as far as the body styles and everything, but
It's
they're
suspect it's
they're known
suspect
to.
last week at Kansas that Tyler Reddick says, "Hey, I'm out of gas. I gotta switch to the reservoir." And then Chris Ware automatically spins out from 30th place or whatever by himself. He spins out on the track, and we got a caution with 4 laps to go so everybody can pit. Come on. We're talking about a multi-million billion-dollar sport here. You don't think they called on the radio and said, "Hey, we gotta get Tyler Reddick a pit right here. He's out of gas." You know what I mean?
I don't know.
It's a little suspect, all this money on the line, all this gambling that we were talking about earlier, these multi-million dollars,
Right.
and in today's day of lawsuits, there's big money on the line. Tyler Reddick extended his contract with 23XI. I didn't see a years. I just saw in every article multi-year deal, but he did that directly before the race here at Talladega. But you've also got a huge win that started. There was a lawsuit going on right now between Joe Gibbs Racing because Chris Gabehart, who was very high up at Joe Gibbs Racing, left and went over to Spire Motorsports. Well, they amended the lawsuit on Monday to say, see, this is material proof. He went over to Spire Motorsports. Carson Hocevar won the race for Spire. That materially affected us. You got a lot of different things that play behind the scenes that if people don't follow NASCAR, they don't necessarily know. It's kind of a drama. You know,
Yeah, it
a
is.
lot of things.
And that's a shame, but, that's one thing NASCAR doesn't want. They don't want anybody running away and, not being competitive. They don't want when they get around to the playoffs, they want it to come down to the last race, you
Well,
know?
if you wanna talk about people being uncompetitive, let's talk about Kyle Busch. The man can't win a race. Last week was his first time getting top 10 this whole season. Turn around on Monday, he fired his crew chief and most of that guy's staff. All right, let's say it right now. That's not the crew chief's fault, Kyle Busch. Get out of the car. You're uncompetitive in a next gen car, Kyle Busch. You don't belong there.
Right,
I
right.
mean, you
Yeah,
wanna
it's
talk about somebody who can't keep up, that's the first name that comes to my mind.
yeah, and there's always gonna be some out there that don't, and, Kyle Busch kind of was that transition between the old school Earnhardt, Wallace, Martin, all those guys to the, you know, Gordon and all them, and the ones that, raced until they were 50 years old. They just don't do that anymore.
I don't know that you can. I mean, it's a different sport, it's a different car,
It is.
and let's be honest, there's so much money on the line. Back in the 70s and 80s, guys had a full-time job during the week and raced NASCAR on the weekend.
Some
Now,
of them did, absolutely.
sponsorship levels that are, through the roof. So,
Exactly, exactly.
who's gonna trust somebody that's a 55-year-old with that amount of money in that expensive of a car? It's just
Well, that's the thing, and there's too many young guys out there you know, that can fill in those last 10 spots in the race that may have a chance. It's up and coming that they're, bringing along or whatever. The guys that are front runners, they're running their Xfinity cars or whatever, they want them in the race. So, yeah, it's not an old man's game anymore.
and in today's world and economy, eyes equals money. Can you get people to watch?
Right,
Nobody wants to watch Goose looking Kyle Busch win a race. Nobody cares. I mean, you got people watching ARCA series right now or O'Reilly Cup, whatever it's called, that have never watched an actual quote unquote Winston Cup NASCAR race. They've never watched a truck series, but now they're watching O'Reilly. Why? Because Cletus McFarland, the YouTube celebrity, is getting a shot down there. And he's already said, "Hey,
right.
it's not financially worth it. I make more money over here than to race a full season. But the races that I can do and turn around, the guy almost wins the race. I think he came in second, because this guy's an internet celebrity. I mean, he's a good racer. Don't
Right.
let me take anything away from him. He was tutored by who's the guy who was in the plane crash this year? I can't think of his name.
Oh,
I know it's one of those. Anyways, by
dang.
him, he was tutored by him to race, and it'll come to us in a minute.
Right.
But I mean, the guy's a good racer, but let's face it, in today's world, whether it be NASCAR, NFL, NBA, whatever, eyes equals money. You got to have the viewers, you got to have the advertising in order to make it go. And I love to see Cletus win. I'm a Cletus fan. I like to, I'm rooting for.
Well, and that's true, they are starting so young too. I mean, we used to go to Atlanta Motor Speedway and watch Thursday Thunder. We probably saw some of these guys race. Joey Logano started, there.
I'm pretty sure we
Um,
saw him and we saw Chase Elliott there.
but yeah, absolutely. They're starting racing when they're 8 years old in these Legends cars, it's crazy. But, they're grooming them to end up in NASCAR, and that's it. It's a young man's
Well,
game.
speaking of racing, though, I know we're getting close on the time, but we got the fastest 2 minutes in sports history coming up this Saturday, and I'm a huge fan. I don't know about you.
Love watching the Derby, love watching the Kentucky Derby. I know we've talked about going sometime. It's definitely a bucket list thing. Love to be there. But yeah, every year I tune in, you know, t- try to figure out what horse is going to win, look at the different ones. So I know you follow it a little more than me. So tell me about the lineup.
You
What's
know,
what's who's the favorite?
well, the favorite this whole week has been a horse named Renegade. He won the Arkansas Derby, which is a huge race, but then the scandal, then the drama. See, I like the drama behind the scenes. Of course, I like to watch the race, but I like the drama behind the scenes because after everybody picked this horse as a favorite, he drew the rail. And the rail is a very unlucky spot to get in the Kentucky Derby, which is the horses line up 1 through 20 in the chutes. The rail is the number one spot closest to the inside, which in a lot of races you want the inside, but on that it's easy to bump the rail. It's easy to get bumped coming out of the gate. And I think that a horse maybe hasn't. I saw some facts. I didn't fact check it, but I don't think a horse has won the Kentucky Derby off the rail since like the 80s. So a very unlucky spot that put a lot of speculation into who else is gonna race. I've got my favorites. Of course, again, I like the drama. Bob Baffert is a very scandalous horse trainer. He's won the Kentucky Derby 7 times. He wound up serving a 3-year disqualification from 2021 to 2024 because his horses were testing positive for outlawed medicines. And actually in 2021, his horse won, and got disqualified and another horse won. But I actually went to Santa Anita racetrack and saw Bob Baffert's horse Justify, who won the Kentucky Derby in 2018. And I'm talking about
Oh, wow.
when you see one of these horses, there's nothing like it. You know, a Derby winner, you see it in person, that you can tell they walk different, they move different than the other horses. It's something about it. But anyways, he has Potente, which is going out at 20-1, kind of a long shot. And then he has Litmus Test 30-1. I don't think Litmus Test has much of a chance, but I think that Potente, I think, especially as tricky as Bob Baffert is and as much as he knows, he's not going to show everything he's got. So I think him on a 20-1 horse, he got a really good draw position. I can't remember what it is, but he got a good position. I like to see Potente at 20-1. The next one that I like is actually a good story. It's called Damon Bourbon, or sorry, Dannon Bourbon. And it's an interesting horse because it got bred in Louisville, Kentucky, sold to Japan for $450,000 at the Keeneland yearling sale. So as a yearling, they sold him. He went over to Japan. They trained him in Japan, etc. He won the Road to the Roses, which was the Fukiwara Derby in Japan, which qualified him for the Kentucky Derby. And then he's come back to now hopefully have his shot at the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
So I think,
That's great.
yeah, I think that's a good chance. Then I'll tell you my favorite to win. Okay, if you got
Okay.
a favorite to win, is a horse named Commandment. He's going off at 6-1. He won the Florida Derby, where he beat another horse in the Kentucky Derby called the Puma, and his grandsire, which would be the horse's granddad, was called the Orb, and he actually won the Derby in 2013. So I think
Oh, wow.
those are my three favorites: is Potentate by Bob Baffert, Dannon Bourbon, and Commandment is my favorite. I would put those in a box to go, top three in any order. But the drama behind the scenes, again, the trainer of Commandment is trained by a Louisville native named Brad Cox. Okay. And some of the backstory of Brad Cox is it was his horse, Mandaloon, that actually won in 2021 after Bob Baffert's horse got disqualified. So he
Oh, okay.
there on a technicality, he's 1 for 12 in the Derby, but he's a local Louisville boy. He's been giving his heart to it. I think he's the trainer who brings home the win this year. A lot of it in horse racing is luck, a lot of it's timing, track, etc. But I say Commandment to win.
Yeah, I haven't really looked in to see what the weather's gonna be. Is there chance of rain? I know that'll affect it a
That'll
lot if
affect it
there's
huge. I think it's
a
supposed to
wet
be
track
clear
or
right now, so we'll see. They get the
okay.
weather wrong every time, so.
Alright. Well, that's great. Well, I kinda like, I was just looking through them earlier this week, and I was looking at you said the Puma that lost earlier this year, but yeah, I was kind of I'm throwing my not really money, but
Your pick.
my, support, my prediction, yeah,
Well,
behind the Puma, so
in
we'll
the
see.
past, the Florida Derby has been the number one pick, the number one predictor of the Kentucky Derby, and the Puma came in second at the Florida Derby. So he's a very good pick. He's got very good odds. I think he's going off at 10-1 right now. Not a bad pick. Very solid pick.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Renegade on the rail. Not a good,
Renegade can hang it up, I think. As much as I hate
can't
it,
win from the
I'd
rail.
love to see him win, but it's very rare that a favorite wins too.
Well, that's true too, that's true too, unless it's just, you know when's the last horse that actually won the Triple Crown
I think it was
and just
Justify in
dominated?
2018, actually.
Right, yeah, and before that, I mean, I know
It's been a
it
while.
may have been 15, 20 years before
That's
that. It
that's
doesn't
what's
happen
so
often.
exciting about the guy Bob Baffert is he's one of the ones to actually do it. He's one of the trainers that's alive today to actually do it, but then his
Right,
reputation got tainted by, having illegal
by the
horse
drugs.
medicine, so you
Yeah,
wonder, okay, was he that good of a trainer and picker or was he shooting them up the whole time? I think the year that he got caught, it was, his horse got tested positive for betamethasone, which is actually like a steroid cream for eczema, so what was he really trying to do? Was he trying to cause less inflammation in his horses? I'm not sure, but
Yeah, that's the thing, exactly. Yeah, what do they do? What are they looking to accomplish with it? Who knows? But they know it's illegal when they do it, so there's something going on there, absolutely,
Bob Baffert is definitely one of
absolutely.
the most interesting stories in the Kentucky Derby. But I think this year Brad Cox and Commandment are gonna knock him off the pedestal.
Alright, we'll be looking for it on Saturday. Well, yeah, we're out of time here this week, but I appreciate you coming on and talking some things other than baseball, although I love baseball.
Absolutely.
But,
Thanks for
I
having me. And of course, as
yeah,
always, go
absolutely.
Braves. I love to see Walt Weiss doing what he's doing. He's kind of like, hey, it's April. We're not clapping. Get back to work. You know what I mean? I love to
E
see that. So go Braves too.
e exactly, yep, we'll do it. Well, thanks again, Chris, and I'm sure we'll have you on again later this year when we get, maybe closer to some college football. We'll talk some more Bulldogs with you,
Anytime.
and,
Thank you for
just
having me.
looking forward to it.